In this podcast, we will attempt to map the future. We will discuss, debate, and at times boldly postulate about how the world ahead may look. We'll explore a myriad of topics from the interesting, the unknown, to the sublime. Because in order to understand where we're going, we must first understand what we will be. We will delve into history, philosophy, religion, art, politics, good, evil, and all the gaps between them. We will attempt to create a picture, a compass of the many possible futures that lie ahead. I won't promise we'll always be right, but I will promise this: we will seek the truth above all else, and we will remain steadfast in our mission to do so. The more we understand about how the future is being shaped, the greater our chance of moulding it into one we actually desire. This is where we boldly go, where no one has yet been. This is where we attempt to set the course. This is Back to the Future. Okay, so we're just going to dive straight into this shit. What I'm going to talk about today on this first episode is energy and the future of energy, because there are, I believe, a lot of misconceptions out there about what the future of energy actually looks like. Because if you believe the media, then within no time at all, there's going to be basically no oil left. And we are going to have to use wind, solar, tidal, hydroelectric, and other forms of what they call clean or green energy. The first thing I'm going to tell you is that's not true. And the second thing I'm going to tell you is that the use of fossil fuels is, first of all, not so bad as we're being made to believe it is. And second of all, that it's not going away anytime soon. Now, the first thing I want to do here is pre-frame everything that follows, because ultimately energy is potentially the most important thing in our entire civilization. It is the literal foundation of our civilization. Without energy, we don't have the lives we have. We don't have cars, we don't have heating in our homes, we don't have planes, we don't have trains, we don't have phones, we don't have the device you're watching this on. We don't have almost any of what we would regard as the modern world without it. So energy is an absolutely fundamental element of our entire civilization. And so the fact that there is this idea that we can move into a low energy world is not just inaccurate, it's entirely misleading, and in fact it's a dangerous idea to begin with. The more energy we remove from people's lives, the poorer they will become. You do not get wealthy low energy countries. In fact, there's a direct correlation between energy usage and quality of life. The people who use the most energy in the world are the people who have the highest qualities of life. That is simply true. The correlation is absolute. There are no high quality of life, low energy people. Doesn't happen. So the key point here is that ultimately energy abundance, the availability of abundant, cheap, reliable energy, is directly related to human flourishing. And where the future of it goes and how the future of energy shapes up is incredibly important. It is perhaps one of the most important things that our civilization needs to get right. Because if we get it wrong, it will cause death. And not just a few deaths, potentially hundreds of millions, potentially billions of deaths if we get energy wrong. So join me as we try to map the future of energy. So in part one, I'm going to get into green energy itself and the problems with green energy. Now, before I get into this, I am not some crazed oil and gas evangelist we're being paid by BP or Total or anyone else. I genuinely believe and genuinely agree that if we are able to find and use forms of energy, or if anything, to be honest, that we can get hold of for virtually nothing, produces little or no wastage and or pollution, and is renewable and reusable and recyclable, then it makes sense. Makes sense to do. If we can use it in a way that is economical, that is viable, that is reliable, and is cheap, then it makes sense to do. The problem with green energy is that it ticks almost none of those boxes. Yes, the sun's energy is effectively infinite. The wind energy is effectively free. It reproduces, and we don't have to worry overly about where we get more wind from. There's always going to be more wind. So from that perspective, the resource they're trying to make use of is effectively limitless. The problems come with pretty much the rest of the equation. Is it cheaper? No. Is it viable? Not really. Is it economical? No. Does it actually work abundantly and reliably? No. And what are the other problems that come into it? So wind and solar, first of all, these are the two big green energies that are out there. And in all honesty, they're not worth the trouble. They are not worth the effort that's put into them. They are not worth the money that's put into them. They only actually work viably through government subsidies and high taxation on their competitor products. And ultimately, they're just never going to be actually a viable solution. They're just not. So I will get into those in a bit more detail in a moment. But there are other forms of renewable energy. There's tidal energy, very difficult to harness, and has yet to have a solution that can effectively and again reliably draw the energy from tides, wave energy and so on. And I've seen a number of different things about how they do this. I saw one recently presented to me at one of our venture capital events where the whole idea is that they will put buoys on the surface. They are attached to a cable system. As the buoy is pulled back and forth on the wave, that pulls the cable, and this drags a pulley system which generates the energy and therefore creates the electricity. Problem is that in order to produce anywhere near enough electricity to make that viable, you need thousands and thousands of these buoys, which isn't impossible, but it's certainly not particularly useful, and you need to put them ideally in amongst existing wind farms that are out on site so that they can take advantage of the infrastructure that's already there. And ultimately, yes, they're never going to provide more than a couple of % of the grid. Don't produce the energy in the scale required to do it. Now, yes, you could go and scale this up so that every single coastline had a load of these things off of it. Problem is, they make the sea around them unsafe. You can't swim or boat in those areas because you've got cables that run under the surface, and therefore there's large swathes of coastline that you just can't do that with. And second of all, you need to have open shipping lanes. You need to have beaches that people can use and so on. So it's not particularly viable. I think again it could play a part, but I don't see that being something that's going to work in and of itself. There may be another way to harness tidal energy. Tidal energy is massive. There are literally hundreds of billions of kilowatts effectively of energy that is trapped as potential energy within the waves as they move in and out in the tides. So there are huge amounts of opportunity there. There's obviously hydroelectric energy, and they've done a lot of things with putting turbines underwater in rivers as well, where as the tide goes out, it runs through the turbine, and then as it comes back in, it runs through the turbine the other way, and again creates electricity. The problem again is that you need to obviously leave some of the river clear so that people can get in and out of it, and it only works as the tide goes in and out. There are peak times for that, and so again, it's not reliable, it's not consistent, and it doesn't produce enough energy to make it worthwhile. Now, hydroelectric dams they're a bit of a success in that sense. You look at something like Hoover Dam, for example, probably the most famous in the world. These produce vast amounts of electrical energy, because what they are doing is they're using the dam to create the lake behind it, which stores a massive amount of potential energy in the water. And as the water flows through the dam, it runs those turbines, and it's continual. They can turn it up and down as they need to, so they can increase the flow, they can reduce the flow, so that they can produce the electricity. And the dams have shown that they work exceptionally well. Dams are a good idea. Problem is, you can't dam every single river, and then you've got the green movement, who actively campaign against dams because they damage the ecosystem, and so you can't use dams in a lot of places, and you have all sorts of reasons why you can't build a dam. And in Spain, they got rid of a load of dams, and then Valencia flooded, if you remember. I don't remember if you saw that piece of news or not, but that was mostly directly caused by the fact they removed hundreds of dams in the local area, and when the heavy rainfall came, all the rivers that would have once been dammed and controlled just rushed water through and flooded the city. Spain are the latest country to be suffering from doubling down on their green agenda. They're currently in a complete blackout, no energy, no mains working at all. And that is down to potentially a number of factors. How the grid went down in the first place is still unknown and is yet to be announced as to exactly how it went down. The suggested reasons range from a solar flare to too much heat to a cyber attack. Now, a solar flare, that doesn't hold much water. There's very little evidence to suggest there was a solar flare. Solar flares generally don't hit very small parts of the Earth. They tend to hit very substantial parts of the Earth when they do hit the surface of the planet. And so that one doesn't seem to hold a lot of muster. The heat wasn't that hot in Spain, and it gets an awful lot hotter than it was when that happened. The cyber attack one. Personally, I think that one might be the most likely scenario, but I don't think they'll tell us if it was. I think that may remain a mystery. The biggest problem they have is getting the grid started again. The problem with rebooting the grid is that because so much of their energy, and recently they published a news article celebrating the fact that they got an entire day 100% from renewable energy. The problem is that the renewable energy sources don't have the momentum in them to kick the grid off. For that, you need large coal or gas-fired turbines, because they are extremely substantial and they have the power behind them with coal or gas to drive them round and kick the grid on. The way to think about electricity in an electricity grid is a bit like water in a pump system. If you imagine water in the system in your house, and you've got your pump down by your boiler which pumps the water around the system, imagine that you got rid of that pump and replaced it with lots of tiny little pumps all around the system. If you have a power cut and your pump dies and then you have to kick it back on again and you switch those on, they aren't able to move the volume of water through the system that is required. The same thing applies with electricity and electrical grids. So there are many problems with green energy, but I'm going to get into a few more now that I think will be eye-opening. So I'm going to begin by analysing and slightly eviscerating the wind turbine, because for a start, let's be completely honest, no matter where you line up on green energy, they're horribly, horrendously ugly things that are giant stains on any landscape that they're on. They are most certainly responsible for killing birds. Birds get hit by them all the time. The ones in the sea have actually been linked to causing issues with whale migrations and things like that as well, because of the vibrations they cause within the water. But those things aside, let's look at the turbines from a pure construction standpoint. So Most people don't realize just the sheer scale of these things and the size that they are in the offshore ones. They're even bigger than the onshore ones. They're primarily steel. Almost the entire structure is steel. That's including the steel reinforcements that go into the 10,000 ton concrete base. The tower of them is the largest and most significant size of it. The blades are a composite. Now, there's a reason that there's a problem with it being a composite, and that is that they can't be recycled. So you will probably have seen the pictures, and if not, here it is for you, of the wind turbine blades being buried underground after they've reached their end of their life cycle, because they can't be recycled. There's nothing else to do with them except for landfill them. We also have a generator and gearbox inside them, which, believe it or not, run on oil and require oil for engine lubrication and so on in order for them to work. And those are very big, very substantial, sit at the top, and that piece behind the blades requires continual maintenance. If there is a leak and the oil runs out, that engine seizes. That's when you see them burst into flames, as you have probably seen videos of as well. There's obviously the electrical wiring and cables that go to them, up inside them, connect up with them, and then come back down again. There is a huge amount involved just there. And obviously then you're not even taking into consideration yet the transportation and the installation costs of them. They require floating cranes to be brought out to stand them up in the first place. They have huge ships that take them out on site. These ships are all diesel powered, because they have to be, because guess what? You can't power ships with electricity at the moment, and you probably won't be able to for a few hundred years at least. There is a whole load of problems with the wind turbine as a pure green solution. Now, the other thing to consider here is whether they actually work, as in their avowed proper job. What they're supposed to do is to offset carbon and reduce the amount of carbon that would have gone into the atmosphere across the course of their lifetime, based upon the amount of carbon that went into actually building them in the first place. I'm not going to bore you all with the details. I'll put them on the screen here, and I will make them available in the description and references. But in simple terms, if they run at the supposed efficiency that they are supposed to run at, then over their supposed 25-year life cycle, they apparently do offset the carbon that is put into them to make them in the first place. However, there's a lot of maths that is missing from that equation. All they're really taking into consideration there is how much energy does it produce, how much energy would have been produced by alternative sources, so therefore it's offset that amount of carbon. It doesn't take a lot of other factors into consideration, but that's the basics. Now, in reality, they offset a lot less than they're supposed to. They don't actually run at the efficiency level that the figures would have you believe. They certainly don't last as long as the official figures would have you believe either. There are numerous problems with them, but the most ridiculous thing about the entire situation is purely that they are a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. And that's without even considering all of the taxes that you pay to have them put in place in the first place, that you subsidize to companies and give them 25-year carbon credits based on the fact they put a wind turbine up, whether it lasts 25 years or not. And all of the other problems within the green supply chain that is effectively just a giant money laundering scheme. There is another issue with it. But as I say, I'm not going to delve too deeply into the individual figures here for a couple of reasons. One, can't be bothered. I can make them available to you. They're easy to find, these figures anyway. But secondly, and most importantly, I'd like this to be slightly more entertaining than me reeling off figures all the time. So we are going to move on to the next step, which is carbon. So now I'm going to get into the carbon delusion. First and foremost, carbon is not your enemy. Carbon is not a problem. Carbon is the fourth most abundant element in the universe, and it is the foundation of organic chemistry. Every living organism, including you, is carbon-based. It is the literal building block of all life on Earth. Plants use CO2 and photosynthesis to produce oxygen so they can grow. Without it, there is no life on Earth. Demonizing carbon is like demonizing water because you can drown in it. So therefore we must eliminate all water from the planet. When you look at it in those terms, it's ludicrous that there is this idea that we must reduce carbon. Now I'm going to give you a bit of context here as well about the existing biosphere of the planet. Current atmospheric CO2 is approximately 420 parts per million. This is historically extremely low. We are able to find through ice core sampling and other geological exploration methods that it has been as high as 1,000 to 2,500 parts per million during the Mesozoic era, which is when the dinosaurs were around, and during the Cambrian period, it could have been up to 4,000 parts per million. That means that at this moment in time, we are in effectively a CO2 or carbon drought in the world. We are being starved of carbon by historical standards. Plants thrive at around 800 to 1,200 parts per million in greenhouses, and commercial growers intentionally pump CO2 into greenhouses to get it to those levels so that food grows larger and faster inside them. So the very fact that you're being told that there is a problem with too much carbon in the atmosphere is the biggest steaming pile of bullshit that has ever been exercised against humanity. It is a giant lie. And it is pervasive and pernicious at its core. And I'll come to that later. Another thing to think about is what global temperatures are currently like. So Earth's temperature fluctuates all the time. It always has. It fluctuates very wildly, and it has gone up to extremely high temperatures and it has gone down to extremely low temperatures without us being even around in the last billions of years and putting any CO2 into the atmosphere ourselves at all. Now, we are currently in what's called a quaternary glaciation, or what they sometimes call an interglacial period, which is a fancy way of saying we're actually in an ice age now. Today's world is classed as an ice age, in case you weren't aware. The reason it's classed as an ice age is because there are frozen ice caps on the poles. When we are completely out of an ice age, there are no frozen ice caps. The poles are completely free of ice. And guess what? That has happened many times in history. And guess what? Not all life on Earth was eliminated. Now, yes, we as humans, as far as we know, haven't lived in those periods. But of course we can. We can live anywhere in the world. We have people who live, not permanently, but for long periods of time in Antarctica. And equally, we have people who live for long periods of time in the Sahara Desert. There is we are able as humans, through our harnessing of energy, by the way, to adapt ourselves to virtually any environment. There are humans who live in a floating box above the world in the International Space Station. We can live under all kinds of conditions. It is, again, ludicrous to consider that the world getting warmer is going to be an utter and complete disaster for the human race. It is not. And of course, when you have warmer weather, life is actually better. You get more farmland, you get that expanded arable land, you get higher crop yields, you get faster crop growth. Everything is better when it's warmer. Cold kills far more people than heat does. Far more. And again, there'll be a reference in the link below about that. Global crop yields have risen dramatically since the temperature started to increase, and the greening of the planet has been documented very substantially. An area at least the size of the continental United States has greened across the last 50 or so years, and that is purely down to higher CO2 levels in the atmosphere. So you have to ask yourself this question: why are we being told that the very molecule, the very thing that sustains all life, why are we being told that we must fear that? Why are we being told that the planet returning to a greener, warmer, more fertile state is going to be catastrophic? Could it be that the climate narrative isn't about saving the world, but instead about controlling it? So the real future of energy, what I want to do instead is, instead of talking so much more about the things that clearly don't work, it's about reframing the goal. What is the goal of the energy of the future? It's really pretty simple. We have to move away from fear and dogma and look at things that truly create abundant energy. An abundant energy future that has a resilient infrastructure underneath it, a way of empowering the developing world, because the richer the developing world gets, the richer the first world gets, and a way of empowering innovation, not using regulation to strangle it all the time. These are the things that matter in creating an energy-rich future for humanity, because an energy-rich future for humanity is the only one that makes any sense. Energy austerity equals death. And I mean that in the literal term. If we go down the energy austerity line, we will kill people. In a first world country, Spain, which it is, in fairness, is on the edge of being called a first world country, they have had, and Portugal, they've had no power for several days. And it's because of this austerity, clean energy push that has so underpowered their grid that they are now a real problem. And they've got people who can't keep food cool, can't charge phones, can't keep the heating on in their house if they're in a colder area. They can't run air conditioning if it's too hot. There's all kinds of things that people now can't do, and every single electric car can't charge either. Just think about that one. Only the people who have still been sensible enough to stay with gasoline or diesel powered cars can actually get anywhere. So there is a whole load of reasons why energy needs to be thought about in terms of what is actually workable in the world, not just what sounds and feels good. So what are the energy options of the future? The one that is often touted, and is often touted by those who are in the same space as me, as in they're criticizing the narrative around green energy, often cite nuclear. Now, there's two kinds of nuclear. There's fission, which is the one we currently have, and there's fusion, which is still in the experimental stages. Now, the good thing about nuclear is you get a really good baseload. It is dense, rich energy. It's clean as well. It's very clean. It produces very little waste. And it really can power entire grids. If you have an entire grid powered by nuclear, it will work. It will not fall over when there's a weather event. So that is a viable solution. But nuclear is not without its problems. There are still issues of large-scale nuclear reactors, and although there is a lot more regulation, a lot more safety in them now, which means meltdowns are far more avoidable and far less likely, they remain a possibility. And still no one's really answered the question of what happens if a terrorist hijacks a plane and flies it into a nuclear reactor. What happens then? Now, one thing I can tell you for certain is you don't get a nuclear explosion, but you could have nuclear fallout. You could have large radiation fallout in the area, a little bit like what happened at Fukushima when the tidal wave hit. So safety regulations in nuclear have got a lot better, without any doubt, and the chances of there being another Chernobyl are extremely low, but they're not impossible. And I think that's the truth of the situation. They're not impossible. They still could happen. There's also far too much regulation in nuclear. It's been made overly expensive by over-regulation. And so there's a number of things that aren't quite right about it. Now, there's a lot of modular nuclear reactors that are coming out these days, these small modular nuclear reactors, micro-reactors they're being called. Those can solve a lot of problems, especially in third world countries and developing nations where the ability to build a power station is very limited, but with a small nuclear reactor that you can drive out on the back of a truck out into the middle of nowhere and plug it into a grid or something set up in the area and power it, then you've got real solutions. So nuclear, I think, will play a role. It will definitely play a role. How well it can become the full excuse me how well and how likely it is to become the dominant energy force on the grid is yet to be seen. So geothermal energy is another one. Now, geothermal energy is one of those ones that ticks most of the boxes in terms of it's abundant, it's unlimited virtually, and you can get and if you can get hold of it, it's basically constant. The issue they have is the ability to reach it and convert it in the first place. And getting into geothermal vents, for example, is not the easiest thing. Piping the heat out is another difficult thing. There has been discussions and experiments around drilling down into vents in order to extract the energy from them. They don't know how good that will be long term. They don't know if that's going to cause fracturing or other problems. So geothermal's very, very minor as far as the existing energy supply of the world goes, and I think it's going to be some time before we can really harness it well. But I think it's worth looking at it as a solution, because we are sitting on a giant ball of heat, and it would make sense to extract some of the energy if we can. And if we can do it economically, as I said before. There's all kinds of ideas around things like hydrogen. Now, hydrogen, I think, has got a genuine opportunity to become the fuel of the future. The advantage to hydrogen is that it's extremely light, even when it's been pressurized and turned into H2 as a liquid and made into a liquid fuel. As an H2 liquid fuel, it can be added as a supplement into the existing fuel of a conventional combustion engine with a small retrofit on the engine, and it's extremely clean. When you burn hydrogen in oxygen, what you get is water. So it's extremely clean, and it's permanently renewable. It's the most abundant resource in the entire universe. It's still quite inefficient to produce. It's still not very easy to produce, and it's still quite energy intensive to produce, hence why at the moment it's not really very economical. But there are lots of opportunities with hydrogen. This is the fact that we can turn water into hydrogen. All you need is water and you can create hydrogen from it. You have the process that splits down the hydrogen and the oxygen atoms and creates hydrogen and medical grade oxygen, both highly combustible and highly fuel dense, energy dense fuels. So it makes an awful lot of sense. And if you read the conspiracy theories, many of the conspiracy theories about why UFOs are often seen at or in the sea is that they are using seawater as a fuel source. They scoop up the seawater, they split it out into hydrogen and oxygen, and off they go. Whether or not that's correct or sure, but it is absolutely true that water can be a fuel source. So there is that as well. There's some crazy ideas about space-based solar and things like that. I really don't see that ever really becoming much use. So, there's a lot of different potentials in terms of where the future of energy goes. I think AI will play a role, because AI has got the ability to very substantially optimize grids and improve the way that electricity flows in power grids and is utilized. So yeah, that's absolutely going to play a role in some way, shape or form. But where is the future of energy in the world? Where is it actually going? What's it going to look like for the next 50 or 100 years? Honestly, it's unfortunately not very exciting. Fossil fuels aren't going anywhere. Despite the attempt to demonize them, and this ludicrous idea of net zero. And by the way, net zero is really, it's the IQ score of anyone who thinks net zero is a good idea. The whole idea around trying to get rid of fossil fuels is not only completely ludicrous, it's also entirely unworkable and entirely unrealistic. So fossil fuels aren't going anywhere, not for centuries. They are going to be with us for centuries. They're not running out. They are not disappearing. We are finding more of it all the time. We're finding more efficient ways of using them all the time. We're even now able to recycle old engine fuel and turn it into burnable kerosene oil. So there are huge advancements in this kind of tech, and different carbon utilization opportunities, gasification of modular plants, carbon to product pipelines. There's a whole load of different things that are going to improve the efficiency and usage of fossil fuels, but they're not going anywhere. Not going anywhere anytime soon. The world is going to have a fossil future. Which incidentally reminds me, I would strongly recommend reading the books of Alex Epstein, who has written Fossil Future and The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels, and Bjorn Lomborg, who has written several books on this subject as well. And both of them advocate for sensible, realistic policies for a higher energy usage future. Hard to argue with them when you read the books, because they are so logical, well considered and well researched that there's almost nothing you can say about it once you've read them, even if you're a green fanatical lunatic. It's not arguable. We also have to change our mindset around energy. It's not about finding the perfect energy source. It's about creating a civilization that is no longer energy constrained. We have to move from scarcity to abundance in our mindset, because energy abundance fuels civilizational abundance. It fuels human flourishing, well beyond anything else that we can possibly do to this world. Now I invite you to join me down a rabbit hole. Now, if you've never heard of zero-point energy, I'll briefly explain it to you. Zero-point energy is theorized in quantum physics, and there is an awful lot of evidence to suggest that it is there. So we now know that the entire universe is energy. There is no solid physical matter. Even you and I and the desks and walls and so on, they're energy. They're just different energy fields with different kinds of vibrational frequencies that mean they can't overlap. It's all energy. And the zero-point energy field is effectively the latent energy of the entire universe. It is the energy that makes the universe what it is, that holds the universe together. It is the force, if you like. It is everywhere. It goes through everything. It is between every single molecule of every single particle and every single atom. It is everywhere. It is the thing that stops the electrons crashing into the neutrons and protons inside an atom. It is the energy that exists throughout space and time. That is zero-point energy. Now, there's been a lot of speculation about how we are able to harness that energy. And if you go down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole, I would very much encourage you to go look at a channel on Rumble called the Wi-Files and review some of their incredible videos around the zero-point energy theories, because there have been numerous examples and cases of people who claim to have harnessed zero-point energy, who then mysteriously die, and their research is seized by the FBI or some other three-letter agency. There is a lot of speculation as to whether or not Tesla discovered zero-point energy and was able to harness it. The theory always being that by harnessing zero-point energy, you harness a source of permanent, free, unlimited energy. And therefore, the most powerful companies in the world, which are energy companies, don't want that to happen. And so therefore, do whatever needs to be done in order to get rid of anybody who's discovered it or found a way to utilize it. That is the theory. How true that is, I couldn't tell you, but there are other theories abound around its previous use on the world, or in the world. And this is where the rabbit hole starts getting murky. The pyramids. You may have seen the recent research that came out showing a team managed to use a LiDAR to discover these structures underneath the pyramids. These giant spiral structures that extend down 2 kilometers under the earth, and there are huge chambers at the bottom. Whether or not, what the purpose of those things are, we don't know. One thing is absolutely clear: the ancient Egyptians did not build those pyramids, and there is even hieroglyphic evidence to suggest that they were researching the pyramids as well. They had ancient Egyptian archaeologists who were looking into the pyramids. So they didn't know where they came from either. What they were built for is still completely unclear, and no one knows. Or maybe somebody does, but most people don't. But the evidence suggesting that they were in fact power stations is becoming stronger and stronger. And this large structure underneath them adds fuel to that. And there are numerous theories about what its purpose is and what that really is about. But the theory to me that seems to make the most sense is that they extend down deep into the earth because what they do is they use the earth's vibrational frequency to channel the earth's electromagnetic field in order to unleash the 0-point energy, or to capture the 0-point energy. The internal stones of the pyramid are made of limestone, which conducts electricity. The outside was cased in a stone, I can't remember it off the top of my head now, I will find out, that does not conduct electricity, almost like an insulator. And it is greatly theorized that the capstones were solid gold for conducting electricity. So the theory behind them is that the pyramids were power plants. They tapped into the 0-point energy field and drew free, abundant, wireless energy out of the ether and provided it to whoever it was that built them. And that the network of other pyramids around the world were way stations or possibly other power stations themselves, and they were the connection points that bounced this energy around and powered an ancient civilization. This could be true, we just don't know. Whether or not it is, one thing is absolutely certain, and it's scientifically backed now, is that there is certainly a latent, what they call 0-point energy in the universe. And if we were able to harness it, it would give us limitless energy. But again, the question comes down to, can we do that economically? Can we do it safely, reliably? We have yet to find out. We have yet to see. So, we've unpacked the illusions. The myth of green energy is dying across the world. So many people are beginning to wake up to it now, and realizing it just doesn't pass muster. We've challenged the narrative that carbon is the villain of our time, which has always baffled me, but I am very pleased that you have listened and taken that on board. And we've explored the frontiers, the new things in energy, the new stuff that could power or energize our future. And through it all, one theme is clear. This isn't a crisis. It's a calling. But what if it's just the beginning? What if there's energy waiting not in coal or solar panels, but in the silent, infinite hum of the vacuum itself? What if the next revolution in power doesn't come from the ground, but from the void? 0-point energy. Unproven, possibly unimaginable, but possibly unstoppable. Thank you for watching Map to the Future. Until next time. And remember, next time you switch on a light bulb or plug your phone in to charge it, just think that energy could be coming from God himself. Thank you for watching. Please be sure to subscribe to the channel, and you can email us any ideas to maptothefuture@protonmail.com. And we look forward to seeing you again in the future.